Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It is day 19 of Crimemas, and today we will be diving into the case of the Gonzales family. Seth Gonzales was born on the 16th of September year 1980 in Baguio City, Benguet, Philippines. He lived with his mother Loiva, his father Teddy, and his younger sister Claudine. In the year 1990, when Seth was only 10 years old, a 7.7 magnitude earthquake hit the island of Luzon. And because of this, the Gonzales family's newly built 40-room hotel collapsed. Seth found himself stuck under the rubble, and when it seemed like there was no more hope in getting him out, his father, Teddy, came to rescue him. After this tragedy, all four members of the Gonzales family migrated to Australia and found themselves settling specifically in Sydney and New South Wales. Loiva and Teddy worked relentlessly to be able to provide for their family and to get back on their feet. And they did. By the late 1990s, Teddy, who was a lawyer back here in the Philippines, was finally able to requalify as a lawyer in Australia. He then opened up his own law firm focusing on immigration matters. And since Teddy and Loiva were very hardworking and successful people, they expected nothing less from their children. The couple were devout Catholics who had very high expectations from both of their kids. However, only one of their kids lived up to their expectations, and that was Claudine. Claudine did well in her academics, but also excelled in her co-curricular activities. Her older brother Seth, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. Seth was your typical rebel teen. He preferred to hang out with his friends rather than study. He didn't think of education as something of value because he wanted to pursue a career in music. He didn't need to study. He needed to hone his talent. He wanted to become a musician, while his parents wanted him to pursue a career in the medical field or become a lawyer like his dad and eventually take over the law firm. And finally, there came a point wherein Loiva and Teddy were able to successfully convince Seth to work for their law firm part-time as he was trying to figure things out in college, where he was doing a much less than satisfactory job. He had terrible grades, most of them failing, but Seth knew that his parents could never find out about this, so he falsified his grades. And he almost got away with this until his little sister Claudine decided to rat him out to their parents, resulting to them taking away his precious car. And instead of moping around, Seth found ways to entertain himself. He would go out with his friends, pretend to study, and work on his musical career. On July 10th, 2001, after finishing his shift at the law firm, Seth decided to drive around and eventually meet up with a friend for dinner. Now, after having their meal, they decided to go and play at an arcade for a few hours before eventually deciding to go home. Seth dropped his friend off at his house and arrived home at around 11:45 p.m., only to find his entire family murdered in their own home. In a panic, Seth calls emergency services, saying that they have been robbed and that his parents and sister have been shot dead. However, once the autopsy reports were out, it revealed something much more brutal. Loiva and Teddy both died due to multiple stab wounds, while Claudine, who was only 18 years old, passed away due to a combination of multiple stab wounds, blunt force trauma to the head, and strangulation. Loiva and Teddy both received stab wounds on the face, neck, back, chest, and abdomen. And due to the severity of the injuries, this seemed to be done by someone with a lot of anger towards them. But who would do such a thing? On one of their walls, F off Asians was written using black spray paint. Their house also seemed to be in a state of complete disarray, like it had been ransacked. However, Upon investigation, police realized that nothing of value seemed to have been taken. So was this purely just a hate crime? Seth made a TV appearance begging for anyone with any type of information to come forward, even offering a $100,000 reward to anyone who could provide information that would eventually lead to an arrest. However, no one ever came forward. On July 20th, a joint eulogy for Teddy, Loiva, and Claudine was held, and during the funeral, Seth offered a song to his slain family. He sang the song One Sweet Day. However, instead of finding it sweet, people found it strange and honestly cringy. And it wasn't his choice of song, it was how he sung it. Seth was very emotional, but not in the way that people would expect him to be. He didn't seem to be emotional because of what happened to his family. He had very strong emotions because he was so into the song, he was so into his performance. It was as if he wasn't singing for his family members. It was as if he was performing in a concert or a show. At this point, police didn't really know where to begin. It could be totally random or possibly one of Teddy's business rivals. However, they never expected for the perpetrator to be so close after all. During interviews, the authorities started to notice how emotionally detached Seth was. It's as if he didn't really care about his family's passing, nor was he sad about it. It was as if he had just accepted what happened, then moved on. And as I have mentioned earlier, based on the injuries that Teddy, Loiva, and Claudine received, it seems like their attacker was someone who held a strong resentment towards them. And this is when the authorities finally decided to look into Seth a bit further. They found out about his bad grades and how he didn't want to become a doctor or lawyer like what his parents wanted for him. The police also discovered that just a few days after the murder, Seth called their family accountant to inquire about his inheritance. Strangely, Seth also told his relatives back in the Philippines that he had a brain tumor and even asked his grandmother for $190,000 for his surgery. Now, she of course did not believe this and never gave him the money. However, Seth did receive a $15,000 payout for what happened to the rest of his family. The officers also discovered that almost right after the funeral, Seth moved into this bougie apartment and bought himself a Lexus. He traded his parents' car in and even pawned his mother's jewelry. Now, all of this was very alarming, but what really tied him to this case was the residue of the black spray paint used to write F off Asians on their wall. Because the same paint was also found on Seth's shoe, specifically the one that he was wearing that night when he made the call. Now, upon doing an investigation of his previous internet searches, the police found something even more incriminating. They found out that Seth had actually been researching and purchasing poisonous substances. And it was reported that Loiva, Teddy, and Claudine were all suffering from symptoms of poisoning before they were murdered. A fingerprint to a series of product poisoning letters also matched the address searches on his computer. On June 13, 2002, Seth Gonzales was arrested and finally confessed to his crimes. On July 10th, 2001, Seth finished work at the law firm at around 4 p.m. and went home. At 4:30 p.m., Seth, who was armed with a baseball bat and 2 kitchen knives, went into Claudine's room, catching her completely off guard, and then attacked her. He hit her on the head at least 6 times with the baseball bat before strangling her and stabbing her multiple times. He then waited for about an hour for his mom, Loiva, to return home. And at roughly 5:30 p.m., as soon as she walked into the living room, he started stabbing her as well. It was also discovered that around 6 p.m., Loiva's sister, Seth's aunt, had actually drove by their home. She saw Loiva's and Seth's cars, however, she thought that no one was home since it was very dark and quiet inside the house. And because of that, she and her son decided to leave, and this ultimately saved their lives. At 6:50 p.m., Teddy arrived home from work. And just like what he did to his mother, as soon as his father walked into the family home, Seth attacked Teddy, stabbing him multiple times as well. After this, Seth got rid of his murder weapons, his bloodied clothes, and shoes. He took a shower and spray painted F-off agents on the wall and staged a robbery to make this seem like a burglary gone wrong. He then drove to his friend's house and arrived there at around 8 p.m. They had dinner, visited the arcade, and once he got home before midnight, he called for emergency services. His motives? He was angry at Claudine for ratting him out to his parents. And he hated his parents for being strict. But his biggest and most important motive was that he wanted to be the sole beneficiary of his parents' estate. He wanted to get a hold of his parents' money and properties. He's a greedy little bitch and a stupid one, honestly. He was able to get rid of the bloodied shoes that he used during the attacks, but he forgot to dispose of the box. And based on the shoe prints, police were able to make out what brand and style of shoe that was. Seth didn't have a pair like that, but he did have the box. On May 20th, 2004, 23-year-old Seth Gonzales was found guilty of the murders of his parents Teddy and Loiva and his little sister Claudine. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He is now 42 years old and is still serving time. He has, of course, attempted to make an appeal, however, all of these appeals were denied. And that is pretty much all that I have for you guys for today's video. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you guys tomorrow.